within a week of the vote, they decided they were shutting down their London office and it was made redundant. No sheep farmer anywhere in the world is getting the price that they need for wool. I love that question.
What a fall from grace.
I didn't mean it like that.
I've been Cammy.
I've been Iona.
And we are both
Fed by Farmers.
Hello and welcome to the Fed by Farmers podcast with me, Cammy Wilson.
And me, Iona Murray.
Today we are joined by Andrew Hogley, the CEO of British Wool. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Cammy.
As I said to you before, we usually do a pre-recorded thing, but because we're now running quite tight with the podcasts, this will be out next week. So it's filmed very soon before it goes out. We're just going to quickly say thanks to our sponsors, which are
Crystalyx and Animax.
Yeah, thanks to both of them, and we'll hear a bit more about them later in the show. And as always, if you're looking for Fed by Farmers gear and you want to support the podcast, check out the website, fedbyfarmers.co.uk, or
go drop into your local Cars Billington store.
You nailed it, you're getting good at that. So sorry about that, Andrew. I kept you waiting there for a second to get
That's quite all right.
The housework out the road. We're going to talk about wool.
Yeah,
it's going. I can already we've not even said anything yet, and I can see the comments already coming in. Before we do that, though, let's just find out a bit about yourself. Who is Andrew Hogley?
So I've been with British Wool about 6 years now. Before that, I was a hated investment banker. And before that, I was a scientist. So I'm not from an agricultural background. I grew up in Yorkshire, in the heart of the old textiles industry, and after 16, 17 years in London, wanted a real job, fell onto British Wool and have absolutely loved it.
Yeah? Do you love it?
I love the job. It's got unique challenges, and I'm sure we'll talk about those as we go through, but it's a product and an organisation I can be passionate about in the way I was never really passionate about investment banking to the same extent. Not that I didn't enjoy that aspect of my career, I had some great experiences, but it's an organisation where I feel I can make a difference, and it's a small enough organisation that I know the entire team and I know what they're working for.
So can we go back a bit? So where were you born? In Yorkshire?
Yeah, so I born and bred in Huddersfield, went to local comprehensive school, went to Cambridge University, did a science degree.
Oh, just like that,
and
just went to Cambridge.
Yeah.
Went to Cambridge, no.
Indeed, and then went, classic route in those days was you then go into the city of London and try and earn some money. You forget your science degree and try and earn some money. And I was working for, you'd have heard of Lehman Brothers,
I feel like I have.
Indeed. I left there a year before it went pop at the heart of the financial crisis. And then
so what was that? Was that a bank?
So Lehman Brothers was the big US investment bank at the heart of the financial crisis in 2008. I left in 2007. I'll get that in quickly.
You saw it coming?
I didn't see it coming, but even at that stage, I'd had 7 years working for a massive institution. There were 4,000 people in the office in London. There were 500 people on my floor. And I only really knew what about 100 of them did. Go on.
Sorry, no, I'm just wondering, so how did your science degree, how did that cross over into banking?
It was physics, chemistry, so it was
maths,
data analysis, looking at trends, asking questions. So my role when I was in the city was I was analysing telecoms companies. So your Vodafone, your BT, your Sky, your France Telecom, your Deutsche Telekom. And then I'd go and advise your fund managers at Scottish Widows or Standard Life, buy Vodafone, sell France Telecom, or buy Deutsche Telekom, sell the Swedish Telecom company. And I did that for 17 years.
I think it was huge money. What kind of money were you on back then?
So I was on multiples of what I'm on now.
Oh, I don't expect so. There's the first reason that folk will be going mad about the wool checks. But what we're talking, we're making millions.
Some of the traders made millions. I was on several hundreds of thousands in my best years, aged about 30.
Yeah, that's
incredible. And what did you spend it on?
I know. I look at you now.
I love that question.
What a fall from grace.
I didn't mean it like that.
A Yorkshireman is a Scotsman with the generosity taken away. I've never had flashy cars. I paid off the mortgage. I bought the house, and by late 30s, I was secure. Which, we're recording this a day before a general election. I'm aware that is not a normal position for many 30-year-olds and let alone in the farming sector.
No,
You know,
but we appreciate honesty. Like
Yeah.
I hate people coming on pleading poverty and pretending they're not.
Yeah.
They haven't done well. Like, it's okay to be. I've done well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a good
Like,
thing.
it takes a bit of work to study and get to Cambridge and do that kind of work. I couldn't do it.
No.
So like I've no issue with somebody doing well.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yes, it was well paid.
Yep.
But from a personal satisfaction and family life perspective, it was in the office before 7 o'clock every morning. It was 13 hours days. I was on an aeroplane, if not every week, every other week. And
Just flying back home.
no, that was going and seeing clients, going and seeing companies. So I'd have a meeting with the CEO of the Norwegian telecoms company one week, the French telecoms company next week. Then I'd be going and seeing investors in Vienna or in Frankfurt or in New York. And it was at least every other week I was flying somewhere and time away from home.
Yeah.
And the first change I made from a personal perspective was my eldest child's, he's just about to turn 15. And when he was born, I went down to a 4-day week, 2 days working from home, each point was in Yorkshire, and 2 days in London. At that time, 15 years ago, flexible working in the city was unheard of. Post-COVID, the world has changed.
Yeah.
And I made a very conscious decision at that point. I wanted, I had 3 young children. I wanted to spend time with the children. My wife and I wanted to have more time looking after them ourselves than farming them off to nursery. So they had 3 days a week in nursery. My wife did a 4-day week and I did a 4-day week.
Yep.
Daddy daycare on a Monday was the hardest day of the week.
Yeah.
And, I had them at 2-year intervals, so similar to yourself, Cammy.
Yeah.
It's fairly full on when you've a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old and a new baby.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
and that's where we are absolutely privileged that we don't really have jobs. Like, we work all the time, but we do what we want to do.
Yeah.
For the most part. There's
Yeah.
always certain things you have to do, but most part we do what we want to do. Like it's a wet day today, great day to do a podcast.
Indeed.
We have that flexibility,
Yeah.
whereas yours, that's a totally different outfit. And it was part of the reason I moved away. I wanted out of the police. I wanted a road out was because to spend more time. The great example I always use is there's people in my work that couldn't get a day off to go to the kids' sports days. And I was just like, no. I was like, that's not for me.
And I had too many colleagues as I was getting to that stage in life that would ring their children up to say good morning and then ring their children up to say good night. And,
never actually see
or
them.
they were putting them in private schools and boarding schools and they were earning really good money, but they were spending it all and never actually seeing the children. And now, what's your value set?
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate. My wife and I, we were able to both go on to flexible working for that 7-year period when the kids were all preschool.
Yeah.
And I really value that with hindsight.
Reduce the risk of fly strike and livestock irritation at grass with Crystalyx garlics. Flies and midges are a constant pest to livestock throughout the summer and are responsible for diseases such as summer mastitis, pink eye, blue tongue and Schmallenberg. No repellent is 100% effective in the fight against airborne biting insects. However, Crystalyx garlics can play an important part in reducing the number of flies that land on livestock. Containing concentrated garlic extract, 5 times more potent than pure dried garlic, Crystalyx garlics offers a natural defense to biting insects, with the high sulfur compounds in garlic acting as a natural insect repellent. With a full complement of vitamins, minerals and trace elements, Crystalyx garlics balances the known deficiencies in forage while stimulating the rumen for enhanced animal performance. Make the switch this summer to research-proven Crystalyx garlics.
And so in 2007, what changed for you?
The change was stepping out of a big US bank. I went and worked for a much smaller organisation, about 140 of us. So we were in the old brewery in Brickland. I was doing the same job, but in a very different culture, very different environment that suited me better. And then as the kids came along, was able to get the flexible working in that environment as well. And in terms of what catalysed the change, we're 8 years since the Brexit vote. At the time of the Brexit vote, I was working for a Swiss bank. Within a week of the vote, they decided they were shutting down their London office, and I was made redundant. So at that point, I was
forced.
It was partly forced, and at that point, it was take that step back. I was already living up in Yorkshire. I was commuting down to London a couple of days a week. I had young kids. I thought, do I still want to be doing this? And at that point, I said, no, let's actually find a real job and one that's where I can be based at home and be living and enjoying the wonders of Yorkshire.
Yeah.
Rather than being trained down to London. And I still do have to go down to London occasionally, for meetings with DEFRA and the like, but you get off the train at King's Cross and almost the body armour goes on as you go into the tube. It just feels different.
Yeah, we spoke about London actually in the last podcast. We had a boy from Australia who was visiting, and he said, London was all right for a day or so, but then he just had to get out. It's just like everyone's in a rush, everyone's different mentality, and everybody's quite...
no one talks to each other on the tube.
No. They think you're crazy.
Yeah.
In fairness, to be fair, if I'm on the tube and somebody starts speaking to me, I do think they're crazy. I'm terrified. But no, so obviously, big change. I mean, I think that's fascinating. I never knew that about you at all. Have you ever seen the programme Billions?
Yeah.
With Axelrod, I think, and they have the what do you call them?
Analysts.
Analysts, of course. Sorry. Was it kind of like that? No, we're not going to delve too much. But was it kind of like that you worked under a trader?
So effectively, I was looking at all the telecoms companies in Europe and looking at the trends, looking at what was leading France Telecom to be successful or Vodafone to not be successful in a particular market, and then building out financial projections and saying, I think the Vodafone shares are undervalued or the France Telecom shares are overvalued, and making a call on that. And then the traders, the fund managers were acting on that. So I was basically doing the analysis, writing the reports, looking at the big trends in the industry. So during my time, the iPhone was invented.
Yep.
Now, we talk about how society has changed over the last 15 years. The invention of the iPhone has had a much bigger impact on society than anything any of our politicians have done over the last 15 years. Now, if you actually step back and look at it, prime example of that was in India for a trade fair about 3 months ago. Every tuk-tuk driver had a mobile phone and was on WhatsApp. Now, that just wasn't the case 10 years ago. The world has become so much smaller and people's behaviour has really changed. And now, that's given you a platform for your podcasts.
Yeah, no,
but it's changed society. It's had big impacts on all sorts of demographics, farmers included.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's good and we can share the information. And it probably comes back to a thing we talk often about, the positive impact that farming and social media can have for encouraging youngsters into the industry. Is the big one I'm always pushing, is like actually make farming cool, make farming great again, but make farming cool like through social media. And I think it is having an impact on that. Obviously, one thing. Did you have skin in the game? Like, would you write a report and then go, right, I'm going to put, or is that insider trading?
So that would be insider trading.
So you can't say either way.
So completely banned. So I couldn't buy any shares about any companies I knew anything about. I couldn't buy any shares in anything anyone else in the business knew about.
Okay.
So, no.
Could your wife?
No. So no one in my family, it was just, no, go to jail, handcuffs on. And given what we've seen in the election recently about insider trading...
Exactly, I was exactly about to see the old Richie Sunak's bodyguards all putting a bet on. He's like, I think we'll call the election 4th of July, is that right? Bet 365, let's just put a bet.
I didn't know that.
Oh, did you see that? Oh, Met police guys getting the sack?
No.
Yeah.
Because they knew when the election was going to be.
Well, they're obviously close security, so they sit in the meet, but they're obviously not meant to... It's
share
obviously
that,
strictly like secret
but
stuff.
But no, the rules in banking and the regulatory framework that you had to work with was incredibly tight. So, the only companies I knew anything about, I could at times influence a share price, and it would just be completely moral, completely wrong, and it would be handcuffs on.
Yeah, you'd literally go. It's literally jail time for it, isn't it? It's like,
absolutely, 14 years.
Yeah, jeez.
14 years.
Yeah. For insider trading.
It has to be terrifying, or else they won't do it. Like, it can't just be a fine because they make so much money they can just pay a fine. It has to be terrifying, the penalty.
But I feel like that's a bit extreme.
It has to,
14 years for...
They don't want to send them to jail for it.
Did you know anybody that went to jail?
I didn't know anybody that went to jail, but there's plenty of cases, if you look back, where people have been caught.
Yeah.
And that's one hell of a deterrent.
So you went from the, obviously, great for getting around the world, knowing big contacts and big companies, I suppose, which will then transfer you quite well. You say you were a scientist, but were you just a scientist while you were at uni?
Just while I was at university.
You didn't actually do science anywhere?
No,
because that's a big drop in wages.
Indeed. Essentially, I saw what the PhD students had to do, and I've got some friends that have gone into that, and some of them have been very successful. But it's hard graft.
Yeah.
And I think the world has changed over the 25 years since I graduated. So when I left Cambridge, most people went into the city, or the scientists and the engineers. There is now a science hub, an industry, and you can actually get a job as a scientist in Cambridge and the silicon fen, and I actually think that's for the better. You shouldn't be having the brain drain into finance, and that's really positive change, I think, for the country as a whole.
Positive for science, of course, and progression that side, but negative for our financial sector. Because is there not?
I don't think we're going to get too many bleeding hearts about our.
No, there's not. But then
it makes a big tax contribution to the economy.
Is the whole big thing about London not that its main industry is finance?
Yeah.
In fact, is it not the UK's main industry is finance? Is that not?
Well, financial services is. So some of the numbers I was dealing with, then you look at the scale of them versus the revenue of British wool. It's 700 years ago, wool was the industry of the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll be kidding myself if wool ever gets back to being the main industry in the UK.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone expects that. And I think that leads us nicely on to the job. It's good, but I think it's great for people because you're just in such a tricky job. Similar to like Alan Laidlaw, who was on previously, CEO at the Highland Show. It's like if there's any dissent or issues with the show or with British wool, it's like you're that head on the stick.
I'm the public face. It's my fault.
You're getting the blame.
Yeah.
So it's good to know a bit about the man that they're blaming, I think.
Yeah.
No, but it is. It's it's easy to blame somebody when you don't really know their story.
Yeah. Completely.
And I think that's the feedback we got from Alan's thing was like folk didn't really know Alan.
No.
They just there was a lot of people would not saying they blamed him specifically, but he's the boss. So the buck stops with him.
Absolutely.
And similarly, yourself at British Wool. So you came into British Wool. You started at British Wool as CEO. As
no,
the boss.
I came in 6-7 years ago now. So I was hired to do business analysis, look at the strategy, get involved in the auction team as well, and do analysis around the auction and the dynamics, who's buying what. So essentially using my financial and data analysis skills to say, where can we make improvements in the business? And then it was in the middle of the COVID pandemic that my predecessor resigned, and I was asked at a week's notice to step up into the hot seat. And it was back end of 2000. We were still having lockdown. So now it seems a distant memory now. We've all tried to put it out of our minds. But it was a very challenging period for the organisation and for the industry as a whole. I had to make some tough decisions in my first few weeks in the role. We made a quarter of the employees redundant, which is never a nice thing to have to do. But if we hadn't been through that restructuring, we wouldn't still be here as an organisation today. Such was the impact that the pandemic had on the industry as a whole.
I think one interesting thing you're saying, you went there and you did the analysis, first of all. Now, obviously, I'm not going to ask you what your wages are, but the drop down from what you were doing to that would be astronomical.
Yeah.
But I think that straight away, that's standing you in good stead in my mind, because I'm like, you're not just here chasing, you're actually doing this job because you want to do it.
I'm doing this big job because I want to do it.
Yeah, which is what we need, I think, in British Wool. So I never knew that bit of your history in that. So that I think that's very interesting that,
I'm not going to say I'm not well paid now. I'm
of course
CEO. I'm running a decent sized organisation, and there is a rate of pay
but it's,
for the job.
Yes, but it's all relative to what you could do, essentially. You know what I mean? There's jobs out there you could do a lot more.
But for that personal fulfilment aspect is important. I've had more fulfillment, I think, over the last 6 or 7 years than I had over my previous 17 years of career.
Mm-hmm.
So when you first started, you were doing the analysis and things. Were there any findings that you did find that resulted in changes being made?
So first of all, British Wool sells the wool by auction. It's a commodity. We run an auction. And I think my second day in the job, I just sat at the back of the auction room and observed. And I very quickly realised it wasn't a competitive auction. We have two main buyers, our two most important customers, but in some of those early sales I watched, they were buying 90 or 95% of everything that we sold in the auction. It wasn't competitive enough, and there's no collusion. I'm absolutely confident of that, but there didn't need to be. So the first key change was getting some new people into the auction, and there'd been a 20-year trend, as I look back in terms of the number of auction participants falling away, and that was partly from the loss of processors in the UK, and we are down to just having 2 wool processing factories in Europe now.
Right.
Wow.
So
both in Bradford? Or?
One in Bradford, one in Dewsbury, and they are absolutely vital infrastructure. So any sheep farmer is aware of the importance of an abattoir. Your lamb has to go through an abattoir. and we've seen the problems in that sector. For the wool, whether it's going into a duvet or a carpet or transport fabrics, it all has to go down the scouring line. And we're down to 2. 25 years ago, there were half a dozen in West Yorkshire alone. So that's absolutely critical infrastructure. Because if we lose that, the only option is to put the wool in a shipping container and send it to China.
Yeah, just send the dirty wool, squeeze it tight and pack it in a container.
Absolutely. And we do have some Chinese interest participating in the auction, but to me, it's a balance. I don't want to undermine the UK industry, but at the same time, we need to have a competitive auction to maximise the value of the wool. And I do an awful lot of benchmarking with the team against where's the comparable wool types around the world trading. So our most comparable market is New Zealand wool. And we are knock for knock, week in, week out, achieving the same price. It's not a British wool problem, it's a global wool problem. No sheep farmer anywhere in the world is getting the price that they need for wool.
Why?
Well, I'll be honest, I'm guilty of it today. Man-made fibres, plastics. Cammy's guilty of it half the time as well as some of the stock he sells. Now, 75 years ago, when British wool was founded, wool was considered to be a strategic national resource. We were 5 years after the end of World War II. UK wool had been used for military uniforms, but polyester had been invented. And if you look at the global fibre market today, 70% of global fibre is synthetics, plastics, fossil fuel fibres, whatever we call them. About 28% is cotton, 1% wool, and 1% other fibres, your cashmere, Angora, and some of that. People use a lot of clothing. Every man, woman, and child on the planet gets through 12 kilos of fibre a year on average. It's very unevenly distributed, but that's about what the average is. Only 1% of that is wool. And the inverse correlation between the growth in plastics and the decline of wool prices in the UK and New Zealand and everywhere is absolutely crystal clear. So we've been competed out by plastics, first and foremost. The second issue is the commoditisation of wool. So the UK, you've been in our Bradford warehouse. It looks like a lot of wool when you're in there and there's 5 million kilos around. But the annual UK clip in its entirety, not just the bits British wool handles, it's only 2% of the global wool supply. And it's a commodity. So the key challenge is how do we differentiate our wool from the generic wool supply? And if we just sell at a commodity price, we've got a problem. Because I did a trade mission to India back in February. And I was speaking to a merchant in India that the previous week had bought 1 million kilos of wool from Iraq. He'd had that 1 million kilos delivered, including the international freight and shipping, for 26 US cents a kilo. That's about 21 pence, including the international transport.
Yeah, including getting it shipped.
Including it shipped, so that's delivered to the port in India.
And what's kind of sheep's that? Just a generic cross-bred sheep?
It'll be comparable to your Welsh Mountain or your Swaledale. So it's not your finest quality wool, but in terms of if someone just wants to buy wool to make a rug, it's wool. It's there. That's the level of the global market. And there's Iraqi wool, there's Mongolian wool, there's Moroccan wool, there's China is the second biggest wool producing nation in the world after Australia. They've probably got 10 times the supply that we've got. There's lots of other wools out there. So how do we make our wool distinctive? How do we differentiate it so that brands say, no, it must be British wool going into my product range.
Yep.
I don't just want any wool. And the culture over the last 30, 40 years has been, I buy yarn to a price. So I'm a carpet manufacturer. I just want a yarn that works. I'm not going to ask any questions about where the wool in it comes from. I just want that yarn to be as cheap as possible. And British wool might make a better yarn, but if you're being beaten down on price and you're competing purely on price, you get substituted out. And selling into a commodity market's not good, whether it's grain or sugar or wool, because you have a choice. You either sell at the commodity price or you don't sell.
Obviously, because we play such a small part in the global trade, is there a way to look more internally and how mindset within Scotland or Britain can change and look at increasing the use just within our country?
So this is probably where I'm most positive. So I've seen, just in my relatively short time in the organisation, some of the brands that we're working with, their purchasing process is changing. So it's not just yarn price. So, some sectors of the market are still price, but we've seen some really good brands come on board and they said, no, I do care about where the wool comes from. I do care about the animal welfare standards, and I'm going to specify British wool in the product. And we're now working with 158 licensees who have ranges that are verified to be made out of British wool. A year ago, we were at 100. 6 years ago, we were at 0. So we're making really good, positive progress. More than half of the wool we're handling is now going to companies that are saying, yes, it must be British wool. And a couple of years ago, we introduced traceability as well. Doesn't change the quality of the wool, but it changes the story a brand can put on it, and you've got
which they can sell.
Absolutely. So we've got brands such as Harrison Spinks. Harrison Spinks is a premium quality mattress manufacturer. They're based in Leeds. They produce about 100,000 mattresses a year. They're now using traceable wool for the padding layer at the top of the mattress that goes above the springs, and they're starting to make the cloth on the outside from some of the higher quality British wool rental, but they're paying a traceability premium over and above the commodity price, and we're giving them the branding and support. So last year, we generated about another £150,000 of revenue from traceability that if we'd not put the systems in place over the last couple of years internally, we wouldn't have been able to extract that value. But again, it's how do we differentiate our wool? How do we talk about the animal welfare standards, the environmental standards, what's baked into UK legislation to actually say to a brand, you should be specifying British wool. And if you're selling into a global market, they care much less about the British. A Chinese mill just wants fibre to a technical characteristic, generally. A UK company, a Scottish company, and we can now give them the right stories. So Locharan Tartan, for example, to make the kilt that King Charles was wearing at the Highland Games last year, they're now specifying it's Scottish wool.
Okay, rather than British.
So serious. And we can give them something. A Devon duvets wants a Devon wool story. With our farmers, it's finding what's the right story to work with each brand to get them to specify wool from our members.
But so that's obviously brand specific, again, quite small scale, but do you think there's a way for a culture change with just the day-to-day consumer?
So I think in terms of consumer behaviour, and we did some work with Patrick Grant recently, who's one of the hosts on the Great British Sewing Bee. You've all seen the brown paper bags outside with the Primark logo on. Fashion has become disposable in many instances. I think the average consumer gets through 169 items a year, or it's some crazy number. And I'll be honest, sheep farmers are not representative of the general population in terms of their wardrobe choices, and I'm sure they wouldn't be offended by me saying that. But the general consumers come to see fashion as disposable. There are some garments available to buy now that on the label it says rewear. Have we really got to the point where we're having to tell people that you can rewear clothing? But that just shows how far wrong society has gone to an extent. People are not buying clothes to be durable, and it's become disposable. And that's scary.
There's a few caveats to what you're saying with a culture change. I mean, the biggest one, without a doubt, in my opinion, is money. It's cost. Wool's expensive because it's an expensive product to bring to the end product, to get it from off the sheep's back, from paying the shearer, from the farmer selling it through to where you guys selling it on behalf of the farmer. It's a fortune. The other thing is, like you're talking about durability, etc. Like if I buy a wool jacket, like I probably only buy one, maybe two wool jackets in my life because it'll last me my whole life. Yeah.
If you buy a wool carpet, it might be down on your floor for 30 years. Yeah. You're not going to re-carpet your living room.
Polyester. Often. You just buy new ones all the time.
And it's that fundamental difference between value and price. Now, the plastic carpet may be £5 a square metre cheaper than the wool carpet, but if it only lasts you 10 years and the wool carpet's lasted you 30 years, which is a better value over the long term. Yeah, and it's getting the consumer to think the difference between first cost and last cost.
And what are you doing to tackle that?
we've got a lot of people to touch. So we're supplying the raw material at the start of a supply chain. So, and in terms of our marketing budget, I'm conscious every pound we spend on marketing is a pound that we're not returning to our members. So I've got to be confident we're getting a return on that. There's a number of aspects where we focus. Some it's recognising that New Zealand wool isn't our competitor. Plastics, the competitor. So there's initiatives such as the Campaign for Wool. So British Wool is the funder of the Campaign for Wool alongside some of the early stage merchants in the UK. And it's the Kiwis that put into that, the Australians put into that, the South Africans put into that as well. There's a trade body called the International Wool Textile Organisation. At the moment, they're doing some really, really important work tackling EU legislation that's basically saying all natural fibres bad, fossil fuel fibres good. It's called the Product Environmental Framework, the PEF legislation. It's frightening in terms of the implications. It's coming on fashion first. So it's similar to when you buy a fridge or a freezer, you've got that ABCDE energy rating on it. They're looking to do that on clothing. And at the moment, the system and the way they've developed it, fossil fuel fibres A, natural fibres E.
Right.
Yeah.
The argument wasn't in terms of the environment.
And it's
but because grazing animals.
We, alongside our colleagues, are arguing that the methodology is flawed because it's not taking into any account things like microplastics and what
happens after.
What happens after. There are issues like that, and that's where we devote some of our attention. And they're quite big, scary things. It's quite detached from the product itself, but those are key issues, and those are things I worry about. We have to educate the consumer, but where I think we've had the most impact is actually working with the brands and the specifiers at brands to get them to specify British Wool to go into, where do we get the biggest bang for our buck, essentially, from our marketing budget.
And this is where the British Wool crook symbol, because you're making that like a go-to thing that the consumer's going to look for.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to blame a consumer for seeing a throw or a blanket in a gift shop, seeing a Union Jack on the label and assuming that wool came from the sheep on the hills there and thereabouts. But read the label carefully. It may just say designed in the UK. If it doesn't have the British Wool Crookmark logo, there's no guarantee that the wool in that product actually came from UK sheep farmers.
Yeah.
I cannot believe that there's nothing in the legislation to make wool an attractive product. Like when there's so much push to become more sustainable, and we're all so much more environmentally aware, and there's a product growing naturally that has to come off.
Yeah, but to play devil's advocate on it, with the sheep game, for example, I don't push wearing wool as such because in my mind's eye, wearing wool is a privilege thing. And I don't generally push things for wealthy people, and wearing wool is for wealthy people.
But then how do we make wool then accessible for?
We talk about making it cheaper. Yeah, but that's one of those. That's a really difficult thing because there's a lot of work to do with wool.
Wool goes into high quality products,
but high quality products are expensive.
High quality products are more expensive, but it comes to where you choose to spend your money. Do you choose to buy 10 throwaway items or one content? Most people are in the.
But I counter that because with most people, it's easier to buy a £20 jumper just now
than a £60-70 jumper,
and then get another £20 one later on than to lay out the £100 immediately for a jumper. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And the other tricky thing is and I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Wool's a fantastic product, of course. A lot of our British wool, and tell me if I'm wrong here, isn't ideal for next to the skin.
Absolutely. So, and I think that's a really important point. So, some British wool is really good for knitwear type products, but it's generally your chunky knitwear. When you see your base layers and that type of thing that are wool-based layers, it's Australian merino.
Merinos, yeah.
And essentially, the sheep in the UK grow wool that keeps them alive in the wonderful weather that we've had this winter.
Yeah.
It's a coarser, stronger fibre. So things like a Romney hog or a Romney lamb will make soft knitwear, or a Cheviot hog. It's soft enough that it can be used in knitwear. But your mule wool, generally, the best place for it, the highest value product it can go into, is really hard wearing carpet. So half of our wool goes into carpets. If it's Suffolk wool has a completely different character. it's fantastic for duvets and pillows. And the cost of a British wool pillow is generally around £30. It's competing against your down-filled pillows and your other natural fibre pillows. It's not competing against a polyester pillow at £5. So within that premium market, how do we expand wool's market share?
And that's where I think our thing is for British Wool, maybe to get away so much from thinking of the idea of clothing and actually all these fantastic products like carpets, mattress top, things that actually are probably easier to justify a big spend. Yeah. Because like you buy a mattress, a good quality mattress.
A good quality mattress is like Harrison Spink's mattresses. For a double mattress, they basically start at £1,000 upwards. They're not a low-end purchase, but it's a quality product that'll last you 20 years. So it's costing you £1 a week over the lifetime of the mattress. And if your wife's on the other side, it's costing you 50 pence a week each. Yeah. So is that good value for a decent night's sleep?
Oh, definitely. and I think a lot of our listeners are farmers, and not that I'm saying farmers are particularly well off, but they appreciate quality.
Absolutely.
Do you know, and it's like that old thing, a farmer will buy a 200 grand tractor, but, the kitchen will not have been redone in 30 years because it's not the priority. And whereas quality, like something like if a mattress that they know is going to last, it's going to cost them more, but they're getting that quality. And it's that old chestnut about, if you're lucky, you spend a third of your life on it.
Indeed.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, why wouldn't you spend a lot of money on it?
But just to give that overview of where does British Wool end up, it's not a consistent product. We have 100 different product lines. So you've been in our grading depots. We take a clip, we sort it out, and you've got your Herdwick wool, your Swaledale wool. Within a Northern Mule clip, we'll sort it into 7 different categories, separate the hogs from the ewes, pull out the grey, the fleeces with grey fibre, pull out the cotty fleeces. They all have a different destination, and we've got to find the right market for every type of wool. We have to find the market for the Suffolk wool, we have to find the market for the Texel wool, we have to find the market for the mule wool. It's not a consistent, homogeneous product. So we've got to find which companies, which group of companies can use the Suffolk wool. That goes into the bedding. Which group of companies can use the mule or things like a Cheviot cross wool, high-end carpet. Where the biggest challenge is, and I'd say the most undervalued wool, it's things like your Welsh Mountain and your Swaledale wool. It's coarser, it's not an inferior product, but it's a product with a different characteristic. And we've got to find the products that are going to drive demand. So those types of wool are used now by companies such as Harrison Spinks in the top layer that goes above the springs in the mattress, actually in the body of the mattress, to give that good support for that decent night's sleep. Last week we announced we're investing in a company going into production making wool-based tree guards. Again, they can use those types of wools where the bit of Kemp, the bit of coloured fibres doesn't matter to the end product. It actually enhances the end product. But we've got to have the demand for every single one of our product lines.
And with something like your wool tree guards, which is fantastic and something I've been taught about for ages, and I know we'd spoken about before, all these things need a lot of product testing, and it's not just a 5-minute job to design something, then test it actually bloody works before you sell it.
The team that has developed it's a company called NextGen. They've been working on it for 5 years.
Yeah.
They've done the field testing, they've done the trials, they've made sure that it's robust enough to survive out in the wilds for 5 years, whatever the weather throws at it, and do its job while still being able to do great. Now, you don't have a proof of concept for that in 6 months.
No.
But they've done the hard work, and now we're coming on board to help support them and get it into production so it can actually drive some significant demand for a segment of our wools.
Just in time for the Scottish Government to stop planting trees. Hopefully. But with the tree guards, could we see it like surely to me, if the Scottish Government's all about the environment and planting these trees, surely they don't have a leg to stand on to argue the point that they should be using these wool guards rather than plastic ones?
Oh,
definitely not. Surely.
So to me, it's a prime example of where wool can be part of the solution to some of the environmental problems. At the moment, you have projects. So it's not just farmland projects, it's some of the infrastructure projects. So there's big motorway junction where the A1 meets the A14 near Cambridge. They put in 850,000 plastic tree shelters just on that one project alone.
Mm-hmm.
Are they ever going to pick those
up?
up?
No.
And so But using a wool-based product, in that you're taking out that cost. So the tree guard will cost more than a plastic alternative. But if you're eliminating the cost in 5 years' time, and who knows what your labour is going to cost in 5 years' time to send someone up a hillside through bracken and brambles to go and pick these things up. Who knows what your disposal costs on dirty, degraded plastic are for recycling in 5 years' time. You're eliminating that liability.
Yeah, but to me, it's more about hypocrisy. It's
Absolutely.
like either you're doing this for the environment, or you're doing it to tick boxes and look good on the global stage. If all they're interested in is a tree, and it doesn't matter how it goes in or where it goes, then that defeats the purpose totally.
Absolutely. And there are some European countries that are ahead of us on this legislation. So in Germany, there has been some legislation to outlaw plastic tree guards and say you've got to use a degradable one.
Okay.
It's a type of thing where, as and when they're in production over the next few months, I want British Wool, with the support of the farming unions, to be lobbying to say, look, we've got a solution for you here. Let's work to take some of these plastic tree guards out of the system. There are alternatives out there. I don't believe the wool tree guard will get 100% market share for one instant, but it shows that wool can be part of the solution. There's other industries as well. So the seaweed industry is one. Grow the seaweed not on a plastic rope, but on a biodegradable rope. There are companies developing wool rope for that purpose as well. Where can wool be part of the solution? Some of the geotextiles, again, that you see on the big infrastructure projects where they put this plastic sheeting all over an embankment while they're waiting for the vegetation to get established. Isn't it better to put a biodegradable fabric down there that's actually going to put nutrients back into the soil?
Yeah, and just leave it as, you can just leave it, yeah.
What are the numbers like in terms of how much British wool is exported and how much wool gets imported?
So it's a great question, but one that is hard to answer. So as I said earlier, we do still have wool processing in the UK. You can make a carpet from start to finish in the UK. You can make a mattress, a pillow, a jumper, complete process in the UK. So about 70% of our wool is bought by the two main merchants who run the two processing plants in the UK. After they've scoured it, then some of that wool does get exported, but it's being processed in the UK. Sometimes supply chains are complicated. So there's some of our licensees, I know they do some of the processing in the UK, then they do some of the manufacturing in, say, Lithuania, and then the product comes back to... What's a British product? Mm-hmm. So global supply chains, the more you look into them, are incredibly complicated.
Is there not some story about, I would need to look into this, so don't take this as gospel, that Scottish prawns get flown, so they land and they get flown to somewhere in Asia to be processed and then flown back to Scotland and sold as Scottish prawns come from the West Coast.
I can well believe that.
But they're across the world to get processed.
Labour in the UK is expensive.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think people should be being paid a wage that they can live on for a good day's work. But from a competitive perspective, it can make some elements of UK processing challenging. There are companies in the UK that just cannot get the labour that they need or the skilled labour that they need. So it's a complicated dynamic. So, as a rule of thumb, about 70% of British wool is still processed in the UK. It's a fantastic product. We should be exporting it to the world to maximise its value. But I want to keep as much of the supply chain and work with as many of the supply chains and the fantastic processors and manufacturers that we've got, often in Yorkshire, some in the Scottish borders, to actually keep that industry, because it's in our members' long-term interest that there's a wool industry. Who knows what trade war there might be with China in 10 years' time, 15 years' time. If we just export all our manufacturing to the side of the world, we'll never get it back again.
Well, we've seen that with loads of things. Steel, we spoke about steel a previous week. They're shutting down the steel mill. I think it's our last big steel mill in the UK.
The mills at Port Talbot, where they're putting in the arc furnaces.
Aye, and they're just going to, now we'll just buy all our steel from China and we'll kid ourselves on that UK is greener as a result of it.
And that brings us on to...
And when this big war happens, say it happens, and all of a sudden we can't make any of our own steel. Bit of a disaster then, isn't it? All the skills are lost.
Talking about war.
I know. Shipbuilding's the other one that's controversial. And I think sometimes in the UK we have a bad attitude towards things made abroad. But I'll use the example, I've used this before, is like, think about if we use China, who manufacture lots of things in the world, right? And I think our general perception of Chinese people, certainly mine, is very hardworking, very astute and able at what they do. You know, you look at the academics you have from there, and they're bloody good at what they, even just look at their economy, they're good at what they do. Like, would you fancy somebody, let's use textiles for example, a British person that works on a sewing machine up against somebody from China that probably does it 14 hours a day and has done since they were whatever age? Who do you think is going to be more able? Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying we couldn't be, but like, everybody thinks Chinese, it'll be poor quality. The iPhone comes from China. Look how it's made.
But I think since COVID, there's a lot more awareness about the vulnerability in supply chains as well. When that ship got stuck diagonally across the Suez Canal a few years ago, and we do see direct impacts on that. So why a couple of months ago was Iceland dumping lamb's legs at £7 a kilo or whatever? It's because they've been on a ship from New Zealand or Australia, and that blockage in the Suez Canal when the Houthi rebels were taking the pot shots at shipping, it meant the ships got diverted around the Horn of Africa. It added another 15 days to the time on the water, and when that stock landed in the UK, they had a week to sell it, or it was past its sell-by date. You know,
madness.
Things that happen in global trade do have a direct impact on the wool market. They have a direct impact on our members and sheep farmers. Now, if you're now shipping from the other side of the world and think, am I actually going to have time to get my product to the market I'm shipping it to as a perishable product? You're worried about losing the entire value of your cargo. Now, on a clear run, it's 6 weeks to China and 6 weeks back. Now, that's 3 months on the water. It ties up capital, it ties up time, it lengthens production lines. Now, I think it's crucially important that we invest in the skills in the British economy. We do still have the skills. We have some absolutely fantastic craftspeople, people working in the textiles industry, but our textiles industry is so much smaller than markets. And I went to India. They have 50 million people in India working in the textiles industry. 50 million people.
Yeah. And
that's double the working population of the UK just in their textiles industry.
I've been told another thing with a place like India is that, like, for every person doing a job, there's 1,000 people standing at the door waiting to take that job.
Yeah.
So, like, you have no issues with folk not turning up for their work, or I'm not saying the conditions I'm sure the conditions are okay, but they won't be like UK conditions. Yeah. But people just they have to get on with it because the demand for jobs, the poverty is so bad, and the demand for jobs.
But as ethical consumers, they need to be questioning, where is the wool coming from? Where is the product manufactured? What are the environmental standards? So the processing plants that we have in the UK work to the highest environmental standards. They've invested hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds in their environmental credentials over the last few years, minimising their energy, using clean energy, concentrating on the effluent and the processing. Now, Yorkshire Water have a big red button. They can turn these factories off at an instant if there's any pollution going into the water. You have that assurance if you're buying British and you're buying through a UK manufacturing chain. And as part of the messaging, not just thinking about the farming standards, but the manufacturing standards, I want consumers to be making informed choices. Now, labelling should make this clear. It doesn't in the textiles industry.
So how do consumers know?
So consumers need to ask questions first and foremost.
But they're not.
Yeah, and you say they're not. I think there's a shift here, and it's not just the consumer; it's the procurement managers within the retailers. And one of the trade bodies we're a member of is UK Fashion and Textiles, and I went to their sustainability conference last September. And you can really see that the buyers and the specifiers are now really challenging the supply chains. They want that visibility. They want that assurance. And now they're aware of the reputational damage and the corporate damage that can be done if they have used sweatshop labour in Cambodia or Bangladesh or wherever it may be. Now, the damage it can do to their brand and their reputation. So there are brands that are caring about it, but then you have the ultimate in fast fashion, the Chinese brand Shein that's about to do a 50 billion IPO on the London Stock Exchange.
I've never even heard of it. What's it called?
Shein.
Have you heard of it? Is it women's fashion?
Mainly,
it's the
they do
ultimate in fast
everything.
fashion.
You
I'm
mean,
up-
do you mean like that, just because I'm not into this, like, you mean like cheap things you wear once and throw away?
Yeah.
Essentially,
Like,
yes.
They're
Is
like
ASOS like that? No.
awful quality. ASOS is better.
But it's like, I always see like girl, they wear a thing once and then, or they send it back, that's the other thing. Pretty Little Thing, that's the thing I'm thinking of.
Right, yeah,
Is that
yeah.
the same?
Shein's cheaper. See,
Is
Shein's like pounds.
What's the one Temu? Is that just like an Amazon?
Yeah, I've never.
You heard of that one? Temu?
I've heard of the name. I'm not going to criticise any brand, but in terms of having that reputational assurance, as a John Lewis, a Marks and Spencers, the quality brands don't want to put their reputations at risk. They want the assurance all the way through the supply chain. And yes, they may still manufacture and outsource the manufacturer. We'd be naive to assume that all manufacturing is coming back to the UK, but they need the assurance that the quality and the standards are there. And it's all the way through the supply chain. And the technology is coming with the blockchain and that type of thing. I think in 5 years' time, there will be QR codes on garments that say, this jumper was sold by this retailer, it was made in this factory, the yarn was spun here, the wool was washed out, and it came from these sheep. Yeah, that type of information and information flow, it's coming. And I think that's a positive for us.
Lizzie has a merino jumper that has a tag on it.
A sheep ink one.
Yeah, that will tell you what sheep it came from, basically. Or what farm it came from. I can't remember what it is, but and again, obviously it's very expensive, but as that traceability.
I think you're a successful man if you can't buy your wife an expensive
jumper.
I
didn't buy it for her. No, she came with it. There's been no more of that since we got together, but it's very nice. Merino wool is like,
Yeah,
my socks are 70% merino. You just can't beat it. For that close to the skin wear. But then for other things like your hardware and stuff, that's where British wool stands on its own.
Most foragers don't supply sheep and cattle with enough cobalt, copper, iodine and selenium, critical to digestion, immunity, reproduction and growth. When it comes to supplementation, there's a danger of under or oversupply. But when bolusing with Animax Tracesure, you can be sure every animal has enough for up to 6 months in one single application. Animax, giving what it takes.
Do you feel like there's some responsibility lies with the British Wool Marketing Board to educate the population on this?
Absolutely, and we do PR, we do consumer campaigns, but I'm very conscious. Where do we have the most impact on demand? So my primary job is to maximise the value of wool for UK sheep farmers. How do we differentiate our products? How do we make sure that brands and manufacturers are saying it's got to be British wool in that product? I want demand for British wool to be more than the supply of British wool, because if we get to that scenario, the price starts to look after itself. And I've seen examples of that. We had an example 2 years ago with Herdwick wool, where we had a year where 3 brands wanted to do Herdwick ranges. There was only enough wool supply for 2 brands. You had a year where the Herdwick price actually did cover the cost of shearing again. But then one of the brands goes, it's got too expensive, I'm going to drop the range, and the demand. Also, the demand's got to be sustainable. That
the balance.
Yeah. I want brands that will commit to multi-year sourcing, where we can build a long-term relationship. It's a brand partnership, and so we're spending quite a lot of time training sales forces. So one of the biggest users of British wool is a company called Brinton's Carpets. They do some high-end residential carpets, but they're generally doing the high-end contract carpet work. So if it's a cruise ship or a Hilton hotel or the Bellagio Grand on the Vegas Strip, it's Brinton's competing for that work. They probably use 10% of the UK clip. Now, how do we help their sales force to sell those carpets to those high-end customers? How do we work with them? How do we give them the story? How do we help the people in John Lewis stores that are selling Harrison Spink's beds to know this is how you sell a wool mattress over a foam mattress to the consumer that walks into that bedding department? How do we drive that long-term demand, build that relationship where they value working with us for the long term?
The customer gets the value out it as well of that traceability side of things. So that's a lot of stuff you're doing, obviously positively for British wool and try to promote that. Where is the wool now? What's the price like this year? How's the auctions going?
So there are 2 things that affect our returns to farmers. One is the price we're able to achieve in the auction. The second is how efficiently we can get it there. And last year, it's hard to remember after the winter we've just had where it's done nothing but rain. But in the summer of 2022, I was at the Royal Welsh Show and it was 40 degrees centigrade. There was no grass in the fields. the fleeces we finished selling a couple of months ago, they were 10% lighter than the previous year. We had 2.5 million kilos less wool come through our infrastructure because the fleeces were lighter. They just hadn't grown to the same extent.
The sheep were so okay.
Now, and if you're a merino sheep farmer in Australia, you don't starve the sheep, but you don't give them more nutrition than they need because you're trying to make a really fine fibre.
Yep.
Now, the wool didn't grow. We had 2.5 million kilos. Now, the cost of our buildings didn't change. Our rates bill didn't drop. The cost of labour still increasing as the living wage keeps ratcheting. But we had 2.5 million kilos less wool, £2 million less revenue to spread over our cost base. So important thing is get as much wool into the system as possible. I can sell every kilo of wool that comes in. And the more I have, the better from the economics of the business. But in terms of selling it, we've got to have that vibrant market. We've got to be stimulating the demand. Everything is of last year's wool, we're more than 95% sold. Wool starting coming in the door from this season. I know there's demand for it. The challenge is to have that demand at a higher price point.
And
I would just to clarify, because your point you made is kind of a very current, relevant point, because there was a headline, I don't know if it was a Scottish Farmer or where, posted recently, Farmers Weekly, that basically what you said there, that there was less wool into less money for farmers because there's less wool, and of course farmers think supply and demand. If there's less wool, surely it's worth more. And I read some of the comments, and that was the general theme of how can we be getting less for wool if there's less of it? But it's the fixed costs.
So let me expand on that. So British wool, the best way to think of us, we're a farmers' cooperative. Legally we're a statutory body, but there is zero government funding for British wool. We're a farmers' cooperative. We gather the wool from our farmer members. We sort it out, we get it into something that can be commercially used, and we sell it on behalf of our farmers. Our costs are transport, warehouses, people, essentially. It costs £12 million a year to have the network and the infrastructure. Buildings are expensive. Our rates bill is about £1 million of that.
Because wool is so bulky.
Wool's a bulky commodity.
You need so much space.
So the more wool that we can get through our buildings, the more we can spread the cost of those buildings over a greater volume. Is the first thing. In terms of, I hear it. I see the comments on social media that if we boycott the industry, if we hold on to our wool, if we don't send it in, we'll get a better price. As I said earlier, we're 2% of a global commodity supply. All that would happen if every UK sheep farmer held on to their wool for a year, the 2 scouring plants we have in Europe were both shut down within 3 months. We would cease to exist. And if farmers ever wanted to sell their wool ever again, it would only be getting it together, putting it in a metal box and sending it to China. Mm-hmm. We're not going to influence the price of wool by starving the market of it, because there are plenty competing types out
once
there.
It's gone, it's not coming back.
Once you're out of a supply chain, it's nigh on impossible to get back into supply chain. Some of the brands we've been working with, we've been knocking on their door for 5 years to get them to do a British wool range. So that dynamic, I would encourage any sheep farmer, send their wool and keep the infrastructure going. It improves every 500 tons that we handle will improve the returns to every sheep farmer by about a penny a kilo.
Okay.
Just as a general rule.
The more British we'll get, the better the return for the farmers.
Absolutely.
But what really is the incentive for farmers if what they're getting for their wool isn't, say, covering their transport cost to get it to you? Why
But is there many of that these days?
So I completely understand the frustration, particularly the farmers that have types such as Welsh Mountain and Swaledale. Shearing is essential for animal welfare. We all know that, but that it's too good a product to be going to waste. Yes, the market has been depressed since COVID. I am optimistic that we're seeing some signs of growth, particularly in the contract carpet market. But we've got to keep the infrastructure viable. We've got to keep the mill sending. So when there is a recovery, when consumers do start caring about not buying plastic fibres, and I think that pendulum is swinging, there's still an industry there and an infrastructure there to supply them. I frequently have this argument with people in the supply chain that, if you don't pay enough for the wool, you will not have a supply of wool. It's got to be economically viable, and it's the same with many agricultural commodities. The primary producer is the one that's getting squeezed. We've made some big efficiency savings within British wool over the last few years to take costs out. But essentially, we've got to have buildings and we've got to have transport to move what is a bulky commodity. And that is always going to have a cost associated with it. At a bare minimum, they should be covering the cost of shearing for them to, I get it that our members feel aggrieved when they get the shearing bill. And even if they're as wonderful a shearer as yourself, Cammy, and you've done a fantastic job, but if they get a shearing bill for £500 and they get a wool check for £200, they're right to feel aggrieved.
Yeah, I tell you
It's worse than that.
But I'm such devil's advocate. I don't know if it's because I'm, I don't remember the good old days. I don't even know how many people actually do remember the good old days. But I compare it to other things. Apart from maybe a fluke dose. In fact, no, I'm going to say shearing your sheep is the best thing you can do for your sheep.
It's essential for animal welfare.
It is, but there's lots of things that could do to make your animal welfare better that people maybe don't do because of the cost. If we talk about things like foot vaccine and other vaccines and things that you could do that we don't have to, you could argue that's not a big cost. With the shearing, right, as it is, now my wool check was £950 last year, and I'm not sure how many sheep were actually shoring that because somewhere in the region of 800 sheep plus some lambs, probably. So it was actually quite good, I thought. People maybe won't like me saying that. I was quite chuffed when I got that. But the fact I get returned for doing something to my sheep that is the best thing I can do to my sheep, I actually think it's a good thing. See, if I put click on a sheep, it cost me £1.70 a sheep. I get nothing back for it, apart from the benefit to animal welfare, which isn't as big a benefit as shearing it. If I heptivac my ewe, I get nothing back for it, except for the benefit to animal welfare, which isn't as big a benefit as shearing the sheep. Dosing, all these things are input costs that I get nothing back for. And shearing, okay, it'd be great if we made a fortune off wool, absolutely. But my mentality of it is, it's an unbelievably good thing to do for my sheep. And again, I'm terrible. But see, because I don't own any land, I've got nowhere. If I wanted to bury the wool, I've nowhere to bury it. For example, see my dirty dags and all that stuff. I have to pay a skip to take that away. So it costs me money to take, because I don't have anywhere I can bury it. I've no landlords that will say, can I just turn your land into a wastefill? I don't. I have to pay a skip every year to come and clear up our dags and dirty wool, and it costs me money. So if we didn't have the British Wool Depot for me to put all my wool clip, would I do? I've nowhere to burn it. I've nowhere to dump it. I'd need to pay a fortune to get it taken away. So I think I'm 10 minutes for a wool depot, which is a big advantage. Yeah. But to me, it's get rid of this big bag of wool that is a nuisance.
But I think that's a mindset thing going from, for you.
No, but here's another thing, devil's advocate, right? And people won't like some of these things I'm saying, I get that, right? But I'm playing devil's advocate. I put a positive on everything, just about everything, apart from dogs. But I try and put a positive on everything, right? People will go, back in the 1970s or 1960s, the wool price. It's what if I say to you, right, tell you what, you can have the equivalent wool price for the 1970s, but you have to take the equivalent lamb price for the 1970s. You know what I mean? It's we want a bit of everything sometimes in farming, and it's actually sheep's bloody good. Just now.
But I think it's worth, just for some context, you don't have to look far away to see what the situation is for farmers in continental Europe where there is no equivalent organisations. In France and Germany, 70-80% of the wool is going uncollected. It is a waste product because there is no infrastructure to collect it, to sort it and gather it. And to me, that's wrong.
Oh, it's disgraceful.
But that would be the reality if we didn't exist as an organisation. But at the same time, I get farmers should get a financial return. In terms of the shearing, I think the other really valuable thing that we do is the shearing training. So this year we'll train about 800 people on one of our shearing courses. We've organised, I think, 137 shearing courses, the length and breadth of the UK. That is absolutely fundamental. And as an organisation, as a farmers' cooperative, we subsidise those courses by best part of $100,000 a year. But I think that's good value for our members because they can either learn the skills themselves or you can find a good shearer at a reasonable cost with decent availability to get your flock shorn for the animal welfare standards you can run.
Well, I learned on those courses.
Yeah, I did a course myself 4 or 5 years ago. I thought it was fit and strong, and I'm not using it nearly killed me. I've huge respect for you guys that can shear and can shear competently. I got my blue seal, but I wasn't sure whether someone was a bit generous at the end of the course. But it's a real skill, and it's a skill that I want the wool to be well harvested. I want the sheep to have good animal welfare during shearing. We do have organisations such as PETA that will be looking for that one rogue shearer who has a bad moment when a sheep has kicked him or her, and they do something that they probably shouldn't. Having that animal welfare standards, that quality shearing, that quality harvesting is absolutely vital. And so I am proud that British Wool supports and invests in the shearing training.
Oh yeah, and I would argue anyone that British shearers are, well, we're the current world champs, or the previous world champs.
Guion is a fantastic ambassador for the industry. We've got 3 record attempts this summer.
Yeah, and you've got Matt Smith as an ambassador as well. I see him with the crook on. So yeah, like absolutely, British Wool, kudos for the training side of things and all that side of things. As I say, I'm just, I might upset people with some of my views, but I genuinely, from my point of view of somebody that doesn't own land, and I know I have to pay to get rid of this dirty wool at the end of the summer when it's lying about, or I've let it get wet and dirty and whatever. Like, if I had to get rid of all my own wool, like these people in Europe, with it, like
it would be a cost,
a massive cost.
But I'm more ambitious than that. I
know. But
I want you to get a return. I want all of our members, whether they've got Welsh Mountain or Swaledale or Blue-Faced Leicester or anything in between, I want them to get a return.
Hey, so
and at the moment, I don't feel they are getting a fair return. And now, we've talked about some of the challenges, but essentially we've got to get people caring about what they're buying, people making positive choices to buy quality products. And I accept some wool products will be too expensive, but there are enough people with enough money that they can make the right choices to support UK farmers, to support the UK wool industry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, certainly myself, I say I've got a nice Harris Tweed jacket. We should give Harris Tweed a wee shout out.
Absolutely.
Good supporters of British Wool.
You were surprised today to see me not in a Harris Tweed jacket.
Do you know, but I actually like that, because every time I've seen you before, you've had your Harris Tweed jacket on.
Yeah.
And when I saw you there, I said that to you. I've actually got that jumper. It's a great jumper. I was surprised to see it. And do you know what? I actually like that as well, because it's not like you're trying to... I just think it's more honest, more natural.
Yeah.
Like you're not trying to be like, oh, Mr. Big, I wear wool every day.
I've been in a depot this morning, pulling sheets out the back of some farmers' trailers near Carlisle. I'll be popping in our depot in Irvine. I've got to be wearing something that I can get mucky.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I want to be able to go into any of our depots, talk to any of our members, talk to our staff, understand the issues, understand the challenges, and try and do something about it where there is a problem.
Yeah.
If I'm detached and in a fine Harris Tweed suit, not worrying about getting dirty, I'm not going to be able to deliver that for our members at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So it's when I'm talking to a government minister, I'll be in a Harris Tweed jacket. When I'm representing the brand, I'll be making sure I'm wearing British wool. But there's sometimes when I do need to get my hands dirty.
You come to talk to us, it's just a Bergos jumper. No, listen, Andrew, it's great. You've got the right attitude. I think it's good for folk just to get to know the man a bit more behind the thing. And yeah, I put my views out there. I'd love the farmer to, of course, I want farmers to get as much as they possibly can from bloody everything. But that's just my kind of views on it. Is like plus 950 quid. I was like, that was a shock.
Oh, I feel like that was quite a good
Pretty
check.
good, eh? I know. Well, I tried to work it out. I think it was like over a pound a share. So that was pretty. It's mostly Scotch meals, right enough. And Cheviot's, which I think Cheviot's quite popular as well. So
Cheviot of the core breeds is the highest valued wool per kilo.
Well, that's probably Cheviot's then.
Yeah.
Another win for the Cheviots. Oh God, man, this is a disaster for the Blackies.
I cannot believe that is the first time. See, when you started rhyming off sheep, I thought surely he's going to say it. Surely he's going to say Blackies. And it didn't come. That was the first
We've
time.
had the swale deals a lot, but the Blackies are great carpet wool.
Absolutely, the fantastic quality wool for the right product.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I think that's no doubt. There is a ton of questions that we'll get in the comments that we should have asked you or should have challenged you on. I can't think any more off the top of my head.
You'll see me next week at the Yorkshire Show, so you can ask me then.
We can exactly. We'll see you at Yorkshire Show. So thanks very much for coming in. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it.